Welcome back to the Becoming Shameless podcast. I'm your host, Nicholas Wallace.
I'm your host, Josiah Baines.
In today's episode, we'll be addressing conflict. Today's episode is called Are We Beefing? And so, Josiah, how do you feel like is the best way to address a conflict?
What kind of conflict are we talking about?
Elaborate. What do you mean, what type of conflict?
We got conflict with other believers. We got conflict with people you know. Conflict with people you don't know. Conflict with strangers. Like, what kind of
conflict with people that you know.
Conflict with people that I know and that are in my circle. I would address it straight up, which I feel like all conflict should be addressed that way, but especially when you have the proximity to somebody where you're able to ask questions and you're able to gain more information to what it is you might have a problem with them or they might have a problem with you. So I think that's a big part of addressing conflict, is being able to have a conversation with a person and kind of clarify what exactly the problem is, and that's only the first step. So
how do you address a problem straight up?
You would address the issue and not the person, right? So if I'm having a problem with somebody that's close to me, I'm going to bring up what the issue is first and say, to give a hypothetical scenario, just because I've been talking about my girl a lot on here, I say I got a problem with my girl, right? I got a problem with my girl, and we're having an issue, right? We're ideally, I don't do this all the time now, but ideally the best way to confront the issue is to say, hey, I've seen that this has been a problem with us, or this issue has been a reoccurring theme with us. How are we going to face this issue? Not how am I going to face you, or how am I going to deal with you, is how are we going to attack the issue together. And so then you work from there.
I agree. I think, the best way to address conflict is to face it head on. Also, at the same time, I think people need to really ask themselves, do you really want to solve the problem? Because feelings seek validation, not answers. And if we're just going to be speaking based on solely feelings, we're not going to get the problem solved, because your feelings fluctuate and your feelings are always biased. Because it's us versus the problem, not me versus you. So how can we both resolve this issue rather than just accommodate your feelings? Because if I'm just trying to accommodate your feelings, nothing's really solved, because even then, I'm disturbing my inner peace trying to keep the peace with you.
Right.
So I feel like as a collective we have to address, are we really trying to fix this problem?
Exactly.
Or do you just want to feel heard?
Right.
Because I could give you a listening ear, but also at the same time I could give you solutions to fix this problem. So that needs to be distinguished off the rip.
Right.
But I definitely believe that it's best to face things head on. But I feel like you have to be very gentle. Like I said before, in the Bible says, a gentle answer turns away wrath. And I feel like with a lot of conflict, you know what I'm saying, there's a lot of heightened emotions. So you have to be very delicate, because someone addressing that they're bothered by something, that's them being vulnerable. And to be vulnerable by definition is to be weak. So they're already soft and weak in that moment. You don't want to, you know what I'm saying, harden their shell by, you know what I'm saying, coming off aggressive with them. You want to be very diligent and making sure that you're giving a kind and understanding response, because everybody wants to feel understood, whether right or wrong.
It's important too, like you said, is being gentle when you address the issue, because a lot of people, a lot of times the issue that they're bringing up really isn't the issue. It's probably something simple that may have triggered them, or they've harvested over a while, and so. For them to kind of peel back those layers and get to whatever the problem really is, that takes a lot of, just respecting the fact that takes a lot of work and a lot of transparency and a lot of vulnerability and a lot of bravery, just to let your guard down and allow somebody to see you in that space. And I feel like that's a big problem with like the media and like social media and like today, like music and stuff like that. You're not supposed to, the way to confront issues now is, what I'm saying, gotta be, oh,
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? You gotta be real rah rah.
gotta be hard with it.
Exactly, and like, and that already just creates another barrier because when you come into that situation like that, then the other person is gonna have to, they're gonna either one, they're even either try to react the same way you are, or two, they're just gonna be like, all right, forget it, or three, they're just gonna look at you like you crazy.
You know what's ironic, bro?
What?
All these people, especially in our generation, be like, "I'm not my parents," but based on how y'all interact with each other, y'all have the same type of argument type.
Yeah.
And also, I want to establish that the connotation of argument is literally just your point. If you're in a court of law, you're giving your argument. If you're in a debate, you're giving your argument. An argument doesn't have to have a negative connotation that it has. But I feel like people when they're like, I don't want to argue, and it's like an argument is simply a disagreement that you're, you know what I'm saying, that you're presenting to somebody with your own points of view and evidence. But so it's like with that connotation, people I feel like fear conflict when conflict doesn't have to be necessarily negative. Like if we have a disagreement, that's right there is a conflict that we're addressing. It's not a bad thing. I feel like the fear of the words themselves create fear in general, and perfect love casts out fear. So you shouldn't be afraid to just communicate with somebody that you're dealing with or that you're friends with in any capacity.
And I think that really comes from the stigma of, like we've talked about before, just in our personal conversation, just everything seeming a whole lot of black and white. Like it's either being one side or the other. Like it's either you on my side.
That
of this
dualistic
argument.
mindset.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You on my side of this argument, or you on the other side. If you on the other side, then you the ops, or you on the other side, then you know what I'm saying.
It's kind of like in politics. Like people, if you're not conservative, you're a liberal, and it's like, why can't I agree with some policies from this party and some from the other? I feel like now we're in a point because, like I said, especially because of social media, there is no middle ground. You're not allowed to just think freely because people are like, if you're on this side, you're an op. You're a bad person. If you're on this side, you're a bad person. It's like, why can't I agree with some things and some things? You know what I'm saying? You don't just, you know what I'm saying, when you cook, just use only pepper. You mix the seasonings. I could use other stuff to add on. I don't have to agree with just one thing. And I feel as if that's where a lot of conflict lies because people, like me, I was talking to one of my friends and I was like, you're in the business of taking things as they are. I'm in the business of understanding. And that's why I feel like people, they lack. When it comes to conflict, people, intentions matter off the rip. I feel like people don't go into arguments intentionally, and they don't go in with the intention of understanding. They go in with the intention of getting their point across. And I feel like when you go into an argument or a conflict, I feel as if you should go in there with the idea that I'm gonna try to understand where they're coming from and come to a resolution, rather than I'm just talk my stuff and get my point across. Because most of the times people aren't really listening; they're waiting their turn to speak. And a lot of times, if you be talking to somebody, you realize they low key agree with you. It's just they're not even trying to be receptive of what you're saying because they're already talking on the defense, and because they're on the defense, they're taking offense to things. And it's like being offended, one, is a choice. So if you're in the business of understanding, you can avoid all that being offended. You can avoid, you know what I'm saying, very being agitated and things of that nature. Just go in with the intention that I'm trying to understand and resolve this conflict.
And I think a lot of that stems from, and I'm not oblivious to feeling that way. It's a lot of just wanting to, like I said before, feeling like you have to prove, not even prove a point, but you're speaking more from a place of hurt or wherever that place is that you're coming from. So you feel like you have to prove your point, or you feel like you have to get your point across. So it might be like, dang, like whatever we're talking about, or whatever the person said to me, or say you got in a disagreement and something was said in disagreement and it might have struck you the wrong way. You feel like you now have to debate that point to protect yourself more and protect your image more than it is to protect more than it is to understand exactly what they're saying. And so, and like we said the last podcast, the way to combat offense is to be curious. So instead of, you know, somebody,
Hi, George,
you always have to ask what it is, or maybe any question that you need to get a better understanding about what the other person is saying, so you're not so offended.